never guess what we're studying next. The book of Micah. Oh, yeah, see? You're right, I wouldn't have guessed that. We're studying Micah for the next 6 weeks as a church. And so I got to thinking about that, and I don't know when you last read or studied Micah. If you read through the Bible in a year, hadn't been that long for you. The last time I know that I taught through Micah was 25 years ago. If you can believe it, I taught Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and all the rest of them to a high school class in the fall semester of 2001. We did all of the prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and all the rest of them. That's a lot of material to cover. Of course, I had them 5 days a week, an hour a day, 5 days a week, so we had a little more time. But that was a long semester. So the last time I taught Micah, and I went back and I got my notes, it was, I could tell you the day, it was October or November of 2001. And some of the handouts that I discovered, I made copies for you. I made some handouts every year as we would do an Old Testament section and a New Testament section, one per semester. We would either do something Old Testament one semester and something New Testament in the spring. And I could have the same kids 3 or 4 years in a row and just change what I taught instead of having sophomore Bible this period and junior Bible this period and try to get the kids in the right place at the right time. So we just had Bible. We changed what we taught and we just had the same kids. I think it's still helpful, and so I made some copies, got some handouts for you. If you haven't read Micah, depending on how quickly you read, I think I wasn't trying to read quickly. 30 minutes. It's not very long. If you turn in our Pew Bible, it's page 823. 3 full page openings, 4 pages all together. Not very long at all. In fact, it's so brief you probably will turn past it trying to find it. So, page 823. The great benefit of the whole church working through whole books, like we've been doing, is really, there's a lot of pluses and upsides. Some of the downsides is if you're out of town one week, you kind of miss the continuity. That's not the end of the world. But the upsides, I think, outweigh the downsides. We're drawing out the message from the books from beginning to end. We're not can't look at every single verse. We weren't able to do that in Exodus. We weren't able to do that in Mark. I tried to do 1st, 2nd Timothy and Titus, and we didn't even get through all of 1 Timothy. I felt like we had to rush to do that. So there are some downsides. However, we believe that that the Spirit speaks to the church in the Word, that when we study the Bible, it's not kind of looking at a dead letter, it's listening to a living Word, then that's the way to do it. To really listen and to go through. Now again, we could belabor it and spend forever in one area. We could just double the time we're going to spend in Exodus, and the benefit is we know Exodus very well. The downside is there's other places that we're not looking. So we have to, our education committee, I think, is doing a good job trying to give us a varied exposure across the biblical library, so to speak. So we've been in Exodus, we've been in Mark, we looked at Old Testament narrative, law, we looked at a gospel, Then we went off and kind of did an excursion in Timothy, and now we're back in a prophet. That kind of variety, that kind of wholeness and balance is all in our favor. Well, let's kind of call to mind a passage from Timothy, 1 Timothy 1:6. Now, the goal of our teaching is love that comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. I keep coming back to that phrase, whatever's going on in Ephesus that Paul writes to Timothy. The church is malformed, they're ill. What they need is healthy doctrine, sound doctrine, because there's malformation. So they need to be well formed. The goal of our instruction is love. That comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and sincere faith. The kind of love that manifests itself in these things, it comes from sincerity, purity, and goodness. So it's tempting to kind of get into, I don't know, detective mode, as if that's the primary, or trivia mode, as if that's the primary goal of doing Bible study. I have often heard, when I taught, I'd poll the classes, I'd poll my kids, what do you know about the Old Testament? Or what makes you struggle as you read the Old Testament? Some of the kids have never even read it. They said, it's too hard. I can't keep the names straight. I can't even pronounce them. I can't read them. I don't know anything about them. They're just kind of empty entities. I don't have any way to understand them or put them together or have, they didn't have the words to say this, but I don't have a way to make any coherent sense of it. It's just names, and there's 1,000 of them, and I just don't. So they said, I just don't read it. Well, I understand, but let's not let that be the goal. In other words, to feel like you have to master the geography or the history or the intricacies of keeping the who and the what straight. Or the times and the chronology. It's tricky. And once you read into the Old Testament more than just a few pages, you realize it's not all in strict chronological order like a single unbroken sequence. Large blocks of it are. So trying to piece it together. Sometimes we place undue burdens on ourselves, and then we're surprised when we're frustrated. So let's not give up. Tackle the difficulties, but it's not impossible, but nor is that the point. The ultimate goal is love, motivated by sincere faith, good conscience, pure heart. So when we're reading, we're listening for the voice of God in the Word to form the church into the people that mirror His goodness. The prophets come along because the people, Israel, Judah, are not mirroring His goodness. So the prophets come in with correction. So this is a different kind of book than we've studied lately. We have not looked at quite this kind of literature, quite this kind of voice. Okay. What I want to do is, we've got 6 weeks in Micah, by the way. If you're thinking, how long are we going to be in Micah? Till Easter-ish. Okay. Let's deal with the book of Micah as we have it, where we have it. And that's kind of how I like to begin. Micah as we have it, where we have it. And I have handouts for you. Maybe the best thing to do, at the risk of giving them to you and having you read them, is to give them to you and just say, okay, we can read them. The danger of handouts is people stop listening to you. Maybe that's a good thing.
Micah's better than some of them, though.
Yeah. She says Micah is better than some of them. Okay. Do you all want? Oh, thank you. I'll tell you what. I'll just make a pass. You're going to share one, or you want one each? You'll share one. Okay. With this mic, I can just walk around. And I would do that when I was teaching. I'd just get up and walk around the class, and they didn't know what to do. I think they expected you had to stay put when you're a teacher, but I'd get up and walk around. So now you should have, the first 2 pages should be front and back. Reader's Guide to Micah, front and back. Got lots of quotes on the second, third page. And then got a back side of that one. Then I've got one at the top says Tanakh. That's probably a new word for you. That's only one-sided. And then I've got a chart at the very end. That's one-sided. So the first couple pages are two-sided. Okay? And then the last 2 aren't. And that's what you should have. And we'll blame my son if you don't have them. He double-checked them. I put him to work yesterday. I said, "You're watching too much TV. Get up and put my handouts together. Here's the stack. Here's the order. Here's the stapler. Assemble the packet and staple them." And he was very proud of himself that he tackled that challenge and got all the pages in the right order and got them stapled. So, I don't doubt him. I didn't check him, but I don't doubt him. If you have one that's not right, we'll fix it, okay? The first thing that I always want to do as we start a book is to give some type of outline or structure. And the way that I've phrased this is a reader's guide. I did this with Mark. I did this with Exodus. We did it with Timothy. The point of an outline is to help a reader get into the book. I'm convicted that is the only point of giving an outline. And the outline, I hope, in every case, reflects what we actually see in the book. In other words, I'm not trying to impose something on it. I want it to speak for itself. That's why no 2 outlines that I ever give look the same, because no 2 books are the same. And I want to take into account the kind of literature we're dealing with when we look at this book. In this case, a prophecy. So a couple notes at the beginning, at the risk of reading it to you. I want to call attention to, and the footnote gives credit to John T. Willis. I only met John in person, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times. I've benefited from him because my Hebrew professor took classes from what he called Madman John Willis at Lipscomb in the 50s. So Rodney Cloud took Hebrew from a young John Willis, and then Rodney has taught at Lipscomb all these years. He's 90. He's still teaching. He's dean at Amridge, still going 90 miles an hour. I benefited from John, and specifically, this book has this outline, this structure. Micah is one of John's specialties. He knew more about it than probably anyone. So I'm crediting him. He says, if you notice, the repeated phrase or repetitive phrase, listen, marks off 3 sections of this book. 1 verse 2, 3 verse 1, 6 verse 1. Listen, all you peoples. Listen, people of Jacob. Listen to what the Lord is saying. Okay? Maybe that's a clue that gets us into the book, an entree to the book, an entry point to the book, is to see how this book is, how it coheres. Okay? So that then is number 2. The basic unit of thought for a prophetic book is the oracle. What do I mean by oracle? That is, it's a statement from God to his people. You'll find that language kind of in religions across the board where the people are seeking a word from their deity. So the Greeks will talk about oracles or consulting an oracle because they're looking for guidance. Okay, so it's kind of a technical term, but it is the word given to the people through the prophet. In this case, the prophet is the mouthpiece, the vocalization of the word to the people. In other words, we the people, how will we hear the word that the Lord says? The prophet is saying, thus says the Lord, and delivers the word. Okay, so an oracle, kind of a technical term, it's God's direct statement to his people, or a people, or a group. Could be a nation. Maybe the word is to Israel. Maybe it is an oracle to Assyria, okay, for example. So as you're reading the prophets, this is going to hold true for Micah. You could go to other prophets. When you see the Lord delivering through his prophet a word to the people, okay, that's kind of a unit of thought. If we're reading a gospel, a unit of thought could be a parable or a set of parables or a miracle story. When we talk about Mark, the sandwiching, you have this kind of incident and then another, something that interjects, and then another similar incident, a miracle, and then some type of statement, then another miracle. So we got units of thought. For the prophets, the unit of thought is the oracle. Now, what's it say? Well, it could say any number of things. It could be good news, could be bad news. An oracle could comfort you, or there could be a word of promise. It could be bad news. The oracle could announce there is judgment coming. Perhaps you can avert the judgment, because as I look down the road and I see bad news on the horizon, you folks better kind of get it together. You could avert the judgment. So that's kind of a warning. It may be an oracle of doom. I look down the road and I see what's coming. It's not good. It's not good. I look out a ways ahead and I see there's great hope. And so when you are right now downtrodden or oppressed or tempted to despair, you need to realize I see better days ahead. Okay? So the content of the oracle could be almost anything. Okay? But what is the word delivered to the people through the prophet? That's the oracle. Okay? They rest. The doctrinal basis or theological basis for the oracle is what God has done and said and promised. It is his mighty act. We saw it in Exodus of bringing Israel out of Egypt. The promise to Abram and the promise to the people. That's the basis for the oracle. What I want you to do, so there's an oracle of instruction, is I want you to be the people that I made you to be when I brought you out of Egypt. See how that rests on the promise and the implication of being the covenant people. I see bad things coming. Why? Because you have forsaken my covenant. I see good days ahead. Why? Because I am faithful to my promise. So the oracles, the doctrine or the theology, the spiritual teaching of the oracles rest on something prior, which is what God has done for his people. In a sense, the law and the prophets are in a tandem relationship, in a sense. there's great coherence between law and prophecy. But what does the law do? Genesis through Deuteronomy. The law narrates what God has done and the intent God has for his people. The prophets come along and either indict the people because you have not done what you have obligated yourselves to do, you have not lived up to the expectation, you have failed to embody the truth of the covenant, or give them hope. Okay? So, Dr. John's outline, if you see how he kind of structures it. He sees 3 sections, each having in content an oracle of doom and an oracle of hope. So if you start, let me try to show you mine. I don't know if you can see, I've got arrows. So you can see how the chapters line up. You start with the first column, part 1, and go down, and then back up to the second section and go down, and then back up to the third and go down. So I've given the chapter and verse references so you can see where in the book you are. John sees 2 types of oracles, an oracle of doom and an oracle of hope in each section. In other words, each section that begins with listen has either a doom first or a hope. Sorry, it has doom and then hope in each case. In some cases, the oracle of doom is brief, and in some cases it's longer or more extensive. In some parts of this book, the oracle of hope is brief. It's not absent, but it's brief. In other cases, it's longer. And he sees the alternating length of the doom and hope as something very intentional. So Dr. John looks at Micah as we've got it, and he sees 3 sections, each introduced with the phrase listen, each delivering an oracle of doom followed by an oracle of hope. In some cases, one is longer than the other, but they're both present in each section. 3 sets or 3 pairs of oracle statements. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Not a typical outline. This is not like a Roman numeral 1, subpart A, subpart B. Not that a typical outline. It's a different kind of an outline. Why? It's a different kind of a book. Okay? Why? Because we're dealing with oracle statements. And the content of the oracle could be good news, it could be bad news. And they're joined together kind of in their own kind of internally logical way. First, we're going to give it a word of doom, but we will follow it with a word of hope. Okay. Micah is one of the prophets. Now, the rest of this handout, we're not going to read it to you, but I wanted to give you some quotes here. Micah is a prophet. Now, not just a prophet, he's one of the prophets, meaning there's a collection of these. The collection, where we have it in our Bibles, is not by happenstance. And it looks like it is part of a long tradition of gathering the prophets together. And again, it makes a certain kind of sense because the law and the collection of the writings of the prophets make perfect sense to go hand in hand, because prophecy, the oracles, rest on what God has said and done already to his people. So we gathered the prophets into their own kind of section. That's all looks like a very old tradition. It looks like it goes back perhaps 200 years before Christ. If you start with these quotes from the New Testament, from the Gospels, I throw in Acts and Romans and Timothy. Should be 2 Timothy 3. There's a typo. You see how they refer to the law and the prophets. Again, I won't read these to you, but just to note them, the law and the prophets. It looks like it's used kind of in almost a technical sense. Now, they don't have a single book. Now, the form of our Bible is a book. It's a set of pages, paper pages, attached on one side. Because we read left to right, it's attached on the left side. It opens like this. There's a cover, a way to attach them, and a back cover. So the form of a book dates from about the third or fourth century AD, and before that we've got collections of scrolls. So the form of this book that gathers the prophets together looks like it rests on a prior or an older way of gathering scrolls together, or putting multiple documents on a single scroll. So the form of this that's so familiar to us actually rests on an earlier way to kind of organize the scriptures. Okay, so they don't have a single book. We would say the Bible. They would say the law and the prophets, the scrolls, the scriptures. You can see that Matthew, Luke, again in Matthew. Look at the Matthew 23 passage. That's interesting because of what he says and perhaps how the books were arranged. This is not the point of the passage, but it's incidental to it, talking about the judgment that will come upon you because you have shed the blood from Abel to Zacharias, or Zechariah. By the way, I use King James Version as I was cutting and pasting from an online Bible. It was the easiest thing to get to, okay? Zacharias. Okay, that's not A to Z in our English. I mean, it kind of makes the point, but they're not thinking in English, okay? So the A to Z, it's clever, but that's not the point, okay? It is the beginning to end, believe it or not. If you understand that, the book of Chronicles, where the murder of Zacharias is narrated, 2 Chronicles 24, was the last book at the end of the canon, as Jews would have very likely understood it at the time. For us, the last book is Malachi, but they would have the law, the prophets, and the writings. The third division of the writings had things that were not law or prophets. And the last book collected at the end of the book of the writings, or the subdivision of the writings, was Chronicles. And the last murder narrated, the end of Chronicles, is Zechariah, son of Berechias, killed in the temple courtyard. In other words, from the beginning of the canon to the end of the canon. So it looks like, you see in Luke 24, this reference of the law, the prophets, and the Psalms. Looks like we've got a three-part division to what they would consider the scriptures. And the head book of that third division was often the book of Psalms. Okay. Well, I won't go and read all of those, but go down to the book of Ecclesiasticus, or the book of Sirach. It's a book of the Apocrypha, probably 2nd century BC. So it's within the Greek period or Persian period between the Old and New Testaments. Jewish book. Talks about the law and the prophets, about reading. And then on that next page, I've tried to help by underlining and putting in bold some of the relevant statements. My grandfather, Jesus, Joshua, my grandfather, he read the law and the prophets and the other books, and he decided to write a book for the edification and teaching. And so here it is. So that's what the writer of Sirach does to kind of as a prologue to his document. He talks about the law and the prophets and the other writings. The Jewish historian Josephus, in one of his documents, talks about our holy books, the books of the Jews. Okay? 5 belong to Moses, and then the prophets. They wrote down their documents in 13 books. It's hard to know exactly which ones because Josephus doesn't give us a list. And if we're going to count them, it's kind of interesting to think, how would we get to 13? Okay. Well, it's very likely he's counting Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings as books of the prophets, as well as what we would call the books of the prophets. Okay. Look at the Talmud down at the bottom of that page, the very end. Babylonian Talmud. Do you remember we talked about the Mishnah? Remember we talked about how much water? Remember the amount of? Remember you're going to do the washings. It was the quantity of water, about an egg's worth of water to do the washings. Talking about the Jewish traditions. Well, the Talmud was those traditions committed to writing. They did one in Babylon, and the Jews in Jerusalem or Palestine wrote down one. We've got 2 versions of the Talmud, a Babylonian Talmud and the Palestinian or Jerusalem Talmud. The one in Babylon, they describe our writings. They say, now the order of the prophets, or the Nevi'im. The Hebrew word for prophet is Navi, N-A-V-I. If you want to make it plural, you add an I-M ending, eem. So a single cherub, a little, we say a little baby angel, a little floating baby, right? Little chubby legs, okay. A cherub is just one. But if you have 2, it's cherubim. If you have one kind of flying creature, you have one seraph, there's just one. But seraphim is 2 or more, it's plural. So when you see that I-M ending, it's a plural ending. So the Navi, or the Nevi'im, the prophet or the prophets, here they are. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, sometimes called the former prophets because they're a long time ago. And then the latter prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and the 12. So they're grouping what we would call the minor prophets all together as one. And we just say minor and major only because we're trying to make sense of the length of them, not importance. So when we say major and minor, we're just talking about length. So we've got 2 sets of 4. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, 1st and 2nd, Kings, 1st and 2nd, 4 books. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, the former prophets. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah is the order they have here because that's probably the proper chronological order. Okay. Jeremiah, well, he'll actually talk about the order. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and the 12, 4 latter prophets. Why do you put the 12 together? Because they're small and they could get lost, so we put them on one scroll. The book of the 12. It's not a different book. It's what we would call the minor prophets all together on one scroll. And now, as you would expect, because we've talked about the Mishnah before and how the leaders would debate and debate and debate. They're going to give you all this, but why don't we put this one first? Well, because of this one. Why don't we do this? Well, because of this. So it's really kind of interesting. You read what their rationale for the arrangement of the scriptures was. Now, these are Jews living in Babylon after the time of Jesus. This is written down probably by 500. Okay? Reflecting older usage and older traditions. And the writings of the Ketuvim. To katav is to write something. Now, I've given you in the blue is the cover image, the front cover of the Jewish Publication Society's version of the Scriptures. We'd say Old Testament. The Jews would just say the Scriptures. The name of it is the Tanakh. And you create a word by taking the first part of Torah, which is T, the N of Nevi'im, and the K of Ketuvim. The Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. If you're speaking Hebrew, if you're speaking English, you'd say the law, the prophets, and the writings. Tanakh. It's an acronym, kind of. It means the Scriptures. And you can see there, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the law, the prophets, and the writings. And I took that right off the Jewish Publication Society website. I wish I had one. At one time I did, and I can't find my copy. I was going to bring it in and show it to you. So I got the cover page there anyhow. Okay. Now the next page, the page that just says Tanakh on it, that's my handout that I gave to my classes 25 years ago. And I pulled it out and I looked at it and I thought, I think I can still go with that. I'm trying to explain to high school kids what I just explained to you. I hope it's helpful. Okay? And I just walk through that, and then at the bottom I've got the books of the Old Testament in chart format that shows the arrangement. Law, prophets, and writings. Our book of Micah is one of the prophets. Comes in that middle section, the Nevi'im. We've got 4 books of the former prophets. Again, interesting, they're considering Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings to be books of prophecy. And that makes a certain kind of sense. If you look at who the major characters are in those books, those are great prophets. They're not writing prophets, at least not like we think of Isaiah as a writing prophet, or the classical prophets. And then 4 of the latter, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12. The Jews would divide the other writings kind of in a miscellaneous group called the writings. Psalms is the longest, often the first. I think that's behind the reference in Luke 24, the law, the prophets, and the Psalms. They would put 5 of them together. The Megillot, which means 5 scrolls, each one to be read at a festival. And then the others, the other writings. The last of the collection is Chronicles. That seems to make sense of the reference in Matthew. Now, that chart, I'm not even going to talk about the chart. I just hope that it's helpful to make sense kind of within the world of the prophets, to kind of get a handle on them, to see kind of how they function and who they're talking to. Maybe a chart is helpful for you. It's a way to present a lot of information in a different way. If it's helpful, great. And if it's not, just don't worry about it. Okay? That's my philosophy of handouts, is it should be helpful, and if it's not, move on. All right? If you haven't read Micah in a long time, now's your chance. Let's spend about 6 weeks, 5 more weeks in Micah. Read ahead, and we'll pick up there next week.